It is time for us to head over to somewhere in Europe. Normally we've seen Graham on the side of the road, we've seen him on a boat, but this week he's on a bike.
Yeah, I am on a bike and you can see it now, but lads, I've got a serious complaint. This always happens. The link to me always has some sort of Freudian, like coming straight off the back, living in a little bubble. Do you know what I mean? And then to me, everybody gets what you're saying. And how did you get Kev Coban to be the translator at Old Trafford yesterday? I'm asking you that.
He's a man of many, many, many talents. Let's talk a little bit, just to get your take on what's going on with Mourinho at the moment. The Zidane phone call was an interesting little wrinkle in the whole thing, and it all feels a little bit soap opera at the moment. But what's your take on how far along the Doomsday Clock is for Jose at the moment?
Complicated question to give you a hard answer to, Ger, because I think people underestimate the degree of autonomy and power that Ed Woodward has, because Manchester United's owners, let's be crystal clear, feel very similarly to the people who owned Arsenal when Arsene Wenger was doing his little "it's good enough to be top four." That sounds like horrendous words to any of us who love football and its competitive edge, but in the modern idiom it means if the owners keep getting their dividends, drawing their money from an investment they don't have to mind, they don't have to touch, they can do other things in their lives, it's sad, but they stay happy. Ed Woodward has been making money for the Glazers, and as such, until now, the football criteria via which a decision like you've asked about there might have been made, they've been blurred by money. It's as simple as that. So the threat isn't because it's a loss to West Ham, or it appears like the football GPS has been lost, or it appears that there is a bad atmosphere at the training ground. The difference now is that Manchester United profile as a team that won't reach the top four by the end of this season. And that's where the clock is ticking. Because that means revenue. They suffered 1 year at the end of Van Gaal without football. The Europa League revenue wasn't enough to keep the Glazers happy. And therefore, I think it's important that anybody who's analysing the United situation thinks of it purely in those terms. The cost, should they choose to get rid of Jose Mourinho, is something that the club can assume. The idea that it will be because players are rebelling or because an individual game, Derby, West Ham, is lost, that's not how the club's focus is. It's about, will the revenue stream be hindered? Will our guarantees to sponsors about being in the Champions League be hindered? At which point, that's when the decision is made. I think there's a crucial spell of games coming up. If you look at Valencia at home, Juventus home and away, and Manchester City, I think that's the point that Mourinho, in my opinion, still definitely has, because Woodward sees his own credibility and his own position threatened by having to get rid of another coach that hasn't met the standard. And therefore, I don't think we're in the dog days. There's a lockdown at United. I don't want to go into details to get staff members into trouble, but when you saw Juan Mata's blog posting, "I'm sorry, this isn't the time to be speaking to you all," that is an order that came from on high. Everybody is battening down the hatches and is unwilling to be seen or even hinted at communicating with the media because there is a lockdown about leaks, and therefore I think it's a very uncomfortable and in some instances quite unhappy ship, and that is not conducive to spirited football, unified football. But listening to that lovely little interchange between the Iberian journalist Jose Mourinho and Neil, I've got a one-liner for every situation, Custis, I genuinely thought that was Jose having an attempt, with my phone's been bugged, at getting back to the Jose of I'm worried about bird flu and I am the special one. Those little one-liners where his face isn't saturnine and a football Lucifer, but instead is trying to look for the Jose with the impish sense of humour. And whether he hit the mark or whether he failed or whether any fans or media analysts care. That's what he was reaching for, lads, in my humble opinion.
It's interesting there that you said that a lot of the Manchester United players have battened down the hatches and are, to a certain extent, afraid to actually speak out about this because it is such a sensitive situation. One of those players clearly is not Paul Pogba, because there's been plenty of things that he's said, and I think, as a matter of fact, from the first day of the season to last week or the week before last, he's actually become more enabled and he's said more out in the open public rather than he has at the start of the season. Do you think that Paul Pogba's teammates are therefore thankful that he's actually put his head above the parapet a little bit and actually had the balls to speak out?
No, he's caused the vast majority of the problems. The batten down of the hatches is much, much more recent. It's very much over the days since Derby, accelerated by West Ham. The number of public declarations, the level of stories, the idea. I can't tell you factually that Zidane phoned Mourinho, but it looked very strongly as if Neil Custis' story was correct. That's another leak. Jose Mourinho was already hypersensitive about not just if stories get out, what damage they do, but who's doing it. He's somebody who demands blind obedience. So the battening down of the hatches I'm talking about from first-hand experience is very much over the last few days. And I think Pogba said the other day when he was asked to comment on something, I think his phrase was, do you want me to be killed? So that was his witty take on it. I'd love to speak, but I really can't. If Pogba thinks he can't speak, that tells you something very strong. Jose Mourinho's tactic about deliberately dressing him down in front of the cameras, a very clear set play, as he called the player liaison guy over to point out, yes, Pogba was the guy I was telling you about, boss, whatever was going on there. The fact is that there's a very high premium being placed upon what messages get out, for good or bad, by Jose Mourinho. And it's really important to understand that he feels threatened, and also his concept of utter, complete obedience is being undermined by people leaking or saying things in response to questions. So I guess going back to Gerard's idea, that would give you the thought that Mourinho feels embattled. It's a very, very soft pillow he's got if he falls over in this instance, in that it would be his second enormous payoff in the space of less than 3 years, should that come to pass.
What about tonight's game then? What type of challenge will Valencia pose at Old Trafford? Part of me feels like he got the team selection spot on for the game against Young Boys, and that might have been a turning point, but since then that same team has not taken the field, and I'm interested to see tonight if perhaps he goes back to something akin to that type of formation and personnel.
What's absolutely crucial for Manchester United scouts to have told Jose Mourinho is that Valencia, while they have the personnel to come and win at Old Trafford, aren't yet quite in the form to do so, I don't think. It's landed semi-fortunate for Mourinho, and he should be able to understand the requisites of his starting 11, because they do have quality and pace, particularly given that up front Gamero and Rodrigo with Gedge wide, that's proper pace, and they do have passing and composure in the centre of midfield, in that Dani Parejo seems to have come through his utterly horrendous week based around the Juventus tie, where he misbehaved in 3 straight games, gave away a penalty, missed a penalty and got sent off. But Valencia as a unit are counting heavily on the idea that Piccini at right back doesn't make more mistakes, that Garay is match fit, and I think he will start. The coach has been bemoaning that Garay has been absent. And Valencia are beginning to come through a trough whereby they treated the football like an unexploded bomb. It was hauled from person to person without much thought about whether it was the right pass or not. And they're beginning to come through that. They've got their most effective, most damaging personnel available, both in the starting lineup and on the bench. If you think about the possibility of bringing Cheryshev on, Batshuayi scored his first goal for the club the other day. So you're looking at a Valencia which is not in the same shape as when they were embarrassed by Juventus at the Mestalla 2 weeks ago. And therefore, they do carry a level of threat whether they carry a level of threat and confidence as clear-cut as Sevilla did last year in knocking Manchester United out, I think we're just a week or two short of Marcelino's team bringing that winning form to Old Trafford. But given how United have been playing, if they play without spirit, you talked about the personnel and you talked about the formation that you think might be repeated as against Young Boys. I think there'll be differences. I think Mourinho's high premium is in understanding who's for him and who's against him in that squad. He has to pick an 11 that believes whatever their relationship with Jose Mourinho is, whatever they think about his actions and his words, that the Champions League is vital for them individually and that they have to give, a sparkling midweek European performance. Otherwise, my idea that Valencia are arriving just a little bit too soon in their season to win could change.
There was one idea over the course of the weekend I had, Graham, just particularly watching Liverpool against Chelsea on Saturday night, just in terms of the extremely high quality in the game and just how enjoyable it was as a fixture. And we've had you on speaking about Spanish football down through the years, and I don't think there's any argument that for the most part of this decade, La Liga has been the dominant league in Europe in terms of the quality of football, in terms of just being the best league in Europe. I wonder now, is the Premier League back at number one? It was a debate Ger and I had yesterday, and I was interested to hear what you would think about that. If La Liga has now been relegated to number two in the rankings, I guess, up against the Premier League.
I think it's early. I think what do you call them in the horse racing? They set the weights. If the handicappers were treating your proposition, I think they'd be looking at the likelihood of your argument potentially being tipped over by the Spanish teams in Europe. I think that basing it on the very clear fact that Chelsea have bucked up, are a happy camp, that Sarri is a very seductive man manager and that the football is very good, that City are beginning to hit their straps at a similar level to last season. If you're taking those things and the fact that Liverpool are now an established proposition to win the title for the first time since 1990, and they're my tip to go all the way to Champions League, I'd be foolish to argue violently with you, but I don't believe the proposition. I think that it's like a badly made pudding that you put cream on top of. The cream will taste lovely. I'm not sure about the puddings though.
Fair enough. I guess.
Sorry, Premier League. I mean the pudding, not the puddings plural. That was just a little slip of the tongue there.
And we'll see ya. Graham, great stuff. Thanks very much.
Cheers, fellas. Viva the Premier League. I take it all back.
Graham Hunter on a bike, somewhere in Spain, I suspect.
Yeah, it is. It's always so kind of exotic wherever Graham is.
It's also sunny. It's like the rain was just cascading gently down when I stepped out of my front door this morning.
What's with mainland Europe still clinging on to summer?
I don't know.
We've plunged right into winter straight away.
Also, yesterday morning came out and was like, "Oh, this is freezing. I'm absolutely freezing on the bus on the way in." And then today, put on a hat and got a scarf and gloves, and it's like absolutely roasting.
Is it?
Yeah. By the time I got in, it was a bit hotter than.
Yeah, Ger gets up when the sun is up.
Sun's up, buns up. Right, calling all students. We've teamed up with Vodafone X to fuel your passion for sport by giving you the chance to join Team Off the Ball for a full week. You'll get to see what happens behind the scenes of a show, attend a press conference, help report at a match, and even feature as a co-host of the show. If that wasn't enough, you'll also receive an iPhone 8 with a year subscription to Vodafone X Sport, which gives you access to 7 dedicated Sky Sports channels. To be in to win, submit your demo tape and details to offtheball.com/Vodafone X. Particularly if Snapchat or Instagram is your thing, we'd like to hear from you, and you can upload all your stuff at Vodafone X. You just need a valid student card to be able to enter this, so we're not excluding anybody who is